Spyro the Dragon is my favourite game series of all time, at least the good ones are. A PlayStation mascot, a 3D platformer icon, a 90s masterpiece.
Spyro, what up, baby? Spit that fire one time!
But there's another game series that perhaps outweighs Spyro in these regards. Crash Bandicoot is probably an even more popular game series, more iconic, well-known, nostalgic, and well-received. Even my followers on Instagram seem to agree. Hell, whenever you play a video game character running toward the camera away from a large thing that is chasing you and will kill you, everyone always says it's a Crash Bandicoot, more often than the actual famous movie scene that inspired it. But does that mean Crash is better? Obviously debatable, but as the title implies, I'm throwing my hat in the Spyro ring. Spyro is my first favourite game franchise, while Crash scores in at a measly 9th. But in all fairness, I will give a bit of history on each franchise. The first Crash Bandicoot was released in 1996, developed by Naughty Dog. The first Spyro was released in 1998, developed by Insomniac. Both were published by Sony Computer Entertainment and Universal Interactive Studios for the original Sony PlayStation. Both developers had made at least one game before these, but nothing that took off, so Crash was Naughty Dog's first big hit, as was Spyro for Insomniac. The similarities do not end there. Spyro has followed Crash's lead almost every step of the way. Crash had a super successful family-friendly 3D platformer starring an animal. 2 years later, Spyro was a super successful family-friendly 3D platformer starring an animal. Crash had a sequel that was bigger and better than the first. Spyro had a sequel that was bigger and better than the first. Crash had a third entry that was bigger with other playable characters and more vehicles. Spyro had a third entry that was bigger with other playable characters and more vehicles. Crash then had a kart racer and a party game. Spyro didn't do those ones, but both franchises had their rights sold by their original developers and moved on up to the PS2. Crash had a disappointing PS2/multi-platform title that looked worse than the PS1 games but maintained their gameplay style. Spyro had a disappointing PS2/multi-platform title that looked worse than the PS1 games but maintained their gameplay style. Spyro had a few well-received Game Boy Advance games. Crash had a couple of well-received Game Boy Advance games. Oh, I guess Crash copied Spyro's homework at 1.2. Only fair, I guess. Well, then they also had a Game Boy Advance crossover with each other, neither of which was very good. But then the tables turned again, because Crash had another PS2/Xbox title that maintained the main character's controls but put him in a more open world environment, as opposed to level selecting through portals, with a script more focused on humour and fourth wall breaking that received mixed reception from fans and critics, what I personally love. Spyro had another PS2/Xbox title that maintained the main character's controls but put him in a more open world environment, as opposed to level selecting through portals, with a script more focused on humour and fourth wall breaking that received mixed reception from fans and critics, what I personally quite like. Then Spyro took the lead again, spawning a new sub-series within the franchise with new character designs, longer decent cutscenes, and a complete abandonment of the core gameplay and classic collectibles with a new beat-em-up style that sucks ass. Then Crash spawned a new sub-series within the franchise with new character designs, longer decent cutscenes, and a complete abandonment of the core gameplay and classic collectibles with a new beat-em-up style that sucks ass. 3 for Spyro, 2 for Crash. In 2007, the rights to Crash were bought by Activision. The year after that, the rights to Spyro were bought by Activision. Then both had a long time off. Spyro had some weird Skylanders thing that abandoned him. Till 2017, when Crash had a PS4 remake of the first 3 games that was tremendously received. The year after, Spyro had a PS4 remake of the first 3 games that was tremendously received. Crash then had a direct sequel to the remake that expanded the core Crash gameplay like never before, and Spyro still has nothing, though there have been rumours. Stay hopeful, Spy Hard fans, because evidently whatever Crash does, Spyro was sure to follow. They're both also in the Skylanders series, but I don't want to talk about that, and nor should I.
Crash Bandicoot. And I have no idea how I got here. Last thing I remember, I was on the Wampa Islands and about to free my friend Tawna from the clutches of the evil Dr. Neo Cortex.
And it wasn't just Crash and Spyro. After Crash, Naughty Dog's next franchise was the Jak and Daxter Trilogy, the PS2 action platformers with lots of guns, starring a cool, edgy young male with a small male sidekick riding him. Then after Spyro, Insomniac's next franchise was the Ratchet and Clank Trilogy, the PS2 action platformers with lots of guns, starring a cool, edgy young male hero with a small male sidekick riding him. Both series of which are also in my top 10. Jak and Daxter then had a spin-off game about them being forced into a life or death combat tournament. Ratchet and Clank then had a spin-off game about them being forced into a life or death combat tournament. Jak and Daxter then had a PSP game all about the sidekick. Then Ratchet and Clank had a PSP game all about the sidekick. Then Ratchet took the lead with a PS2/PSP game, reuniting the two on another adventure that was nowhere near as good as the original trilogy. And you'll never guess what Jak and Daxter did then. The absolute same thing. Then Ratchet & Clank would go on to make so many awesome well-received games on the PS3, PS4 and PS5 as well as a movie adaptation. Then Jak and Daxter literally haven't had anything since Lost Frontier in 2009. Naughty Dog would go on to make the huge franchises Uncharted and The Last of Us. Insomniac would go on to do the awesome recent Spider-Man PS4/5 games and a bunch of games I've never heard of. I'm sure that's completely similar in a way, but in any case, since Naughty Dog and Insomniac were both game developers working within Universal Interactive, they always helped each other out and their mascot characters often appeared in each other's games. Jak and Daxter would appear in Ratchet & Clank games and vice versa. But back to our main boys, Spyro and Crash always had demos of each other's games hidden in theirs. Spyro would make cameos in future Crash games. Why a Spyro game has never had a Crash cameo, I'll never know. Bandicoot's gotta earn it. In fact, in 2004, their GBA crossover games came out. Crash Bandicoot Purple, and as the sneaky dragon likes to copycat his way through Crash's legacy, Spyro Orange. I played both for this video and they're not very good. But anyway, I think you're up to speed with how the franchises parallel each other now, setting themselves up for a lot of comparisons. But really, despite the similarities I've pointed out, they are quite different when it comes to how they play, what the objectives are, how they control, etc. And it's these differences that I prefer Spyro for. It may have sounded like Spyro was just copying everything Crash did for the most part, and Spyro may indeed have had the advantage when it comes to time, but let's compare each corresponding entry to make my point. When Crash came out, it was something the world had never seen before. A Bandicoot. Man, I'm Australian and I don't think I'd know what this native animal of ours is if it weren't for Crash. As an Aussie, you'd think that'd give Crash an advantage over Spyro, but
I just flew in from the New Ruins level and boy are my arms tired!
it really doesn't. As much as I love Crash 1, it's always obvious why the two sequels are better. Crash 1 has the disadvantage of being one of the first mainstream 3D platformers, coming out just 3 months after Super Mario 64. I'm not afraid to say that Super Mario 64 controls like fucking ass. Crash controls a lot better, but it was still developed within the first year of PlayStation existing, so he's a heavy boy who doesn't jump quite as far as you'd want him to. Spyro, again, has the advantage of being released 2 years later, and Insomniac are fucking experts at how to control characters and how they feel. Spyro 1 has aged super well. Not perfectly, he's still a bit of a janky boy, but there wasn't much to improve upon in the sequels. But unlike Chunky Kong, Spyro moves fast and can jump high, and is also one hell of a guy. Spyro is always so much fun to just charge and glide around with. I dare not ever play the Japanese version where the charge is the same speed as our normal walk. Just kidding, I played the Japanese version for this video too, and just look at that camera you can't control. Now let's talk about their level designs. Crash is almost always known for having basically linear levels where to finish the game, you're always going to go straight to the end of the level. Admittedly, even the first level has a slightly branching path, but then every level must be played in order on this level select screen. Even NES games in 1989 were more creative than this. Not that I have a personal issue with that, but the sequels make it look so much better just by being able to control Crash normally in one hub location, and being able to choose 5 levels at a time in any order you want. While Spyro 1 has 6 hub worlds that have 4 to 5 portals in each of them, the portals being the levels. While there's nothing wrong with linear level design, at the same time I much prefer the Spyro method of having a bigger explorable area. A lot of levels do have a simple straightforward way to the finish line, but they still have so many different areas. This is because collecting items is much more necessary. With Crash, the items are for HP, extra lives, and getting into a bonus room and completing that so you can save your game. That's right, the only way you can save your game is either by collecting all 3 Torna tokens in a level and then completing a bonus round. If you die in this bonus round, no saving for you. Instead, you'll need to leave the level and start the level all over again. If you do make it, the game is actually gracious enough to let you save game and treats you like you're lucky to have it. It even sweetens the deal and gives you a password for each stage, but that's hardly satisfying now, is it? Each time you get every box in the level without dying, you also get a gem. Every time you get a gem, it also gives you a chance to save. But all it saves is the fact that you got that gem. Same goes for the 2 keys in the game. Only the Torna rounds save what level you're up to. So if you beat a bunch of really hard levels and did get all the Torna tokens in any of them, or did complete the bonus rounds in any of them, if you run out of lives and get a big old game over or mum says it's time to go to bed, you are in big trouble, mister. You're repeating all these levels again, even if you got a gem and saved that somehow. Now, you don't need any of these gems to actually finish the game. just get to the end of each level and eventually fight the evil doctor who will later become one of the greatest characters in video game history. In a boss battle that's pretty fun, and get a decent ending to the story where Crash saves his Bandicoot girlfriend based on Pamela Anderson, so I call her Pamela Banderson, who's really the Short Kings, and you fly away in Cortex's blimp together after triumphing over evil. But if you have every gem in the game, you can actually use them to play the Great Hall. It's so much hard work to get every gem in the game, playing all these levels, getting every box without a counter, not being able to die even once or you'll have to start the entire level over again, so getting all of them warrants you a huge bonus reward, hey? Maybe access to a new level and a secret ending showing what happens after you defeat Cortex? Well, joke's on you, this is Crash 1, so instead, you get to go an alternative route in the Great Hall without having to face Cortex at all. Play this incredibly fun level where all you're doing is jumping from gem to gem and then seeing Torna with one of those bird enemies that Torna has seduced to the good guy side. They then fly on the bird away from the castle. The only good thing about this is getting a humorous epilogue on all these characters we've come to know so well. Even Cortex, who we canonically have not even fought in this version. So if you wanted to be able to skip the final boss and instead jump on a bunch of steel platforms that are all the same size and shape, then boy oh boy you better get used to breaking boxes and hearing which the game will encourage every time you finish a level, because why save your girlfriend from horrible experiments being performed on her for evil when these wooden crates are sitting there storing Wumpa fruit? So yeah, good game, it's fun, holds up. The opening cutscene will only play if you stay on the menu too long. If you do, you'll be treated to a very typical mad doctor and assistant relationship, performing experiments on a Bandicoot, hopefully to invent a way to sync voice acting to character mouth movement.
I shall reign triumphant. The Dr. Cortex, the Vortex is not ready. We have no idea what it could do.
Only for him to not say a word or anything resembling one again until Crash Tag Team Racing 9 years later. Weird that they hide the story establishment in what's usually reserved for a demo mode, because if you're one of those people who actually like playing games, you'll probably press start to begin with and then be a Bandicoot waking up on a beach with no context on what he's doing there and then have to make up your own story yourself. Maybe this fox in shorts has amnesia and all he knows is to spin and kill crabs. Not that the story is important at all in this game, but I personally do want more than Orange Blob walks forward and touches apples for my character motivation. At least the health system was unique at the time. Instead of eating a fungus to grow bigger or getting another playable character to back you up, Crash gets an extra health point by grabbing the Yaku Waku masks. So your health indicator is a floating creature that follows you, and the amount of hits you can take is determined by the floating creature's colour. And if you're at max hit points and grab another mask, you get to be invincible for a little bit, as a treat. But let's compare all that to Spyro, shall we? Story-wise, it's not much better, but at least the opening cutscene plays when you choose a new game, and the voice acting is actually syncing with the lips, or at least polygons, of these guys' mouths.
Nasty Nork is a simple creature. Simple.
It's a bit more confusing though, as Nasty Nork is never shown to be watching this report on TV, but it's implied by him hearing it in this dungeon-looking area, which I'm sure has the latest 1998 satellite TV in it, so he can watch this incredibly fast live report all about the creatures that abandoned him. But it does its job and sets up Spyro for what he has to do, and every time you save a dragon, a small cutscene with voice acting plays then too, adding a lot more character to Spyro than Crash from the get-go. And you can save your game on any of the platforms that the dragons are on, meaning there's 79 places to save your game, because one dragon replaces where another was. Just don't be like me and assume this game is like the sequels where it auto-saves whenever you use a portal. Last time I played Spyro 1, boy did I pay the price for that assumption. Your health indicator is a floating creature that follows you, and the amount of hits you can take is determined by the floating creature's colour. So Spyro's health system is a lot like Crash's, but you start off with full health and your Dragonfly boy Sparks is your indicator. Every time you get hit, Sparks will go down from gold to blue to green to being completely destroyed, leaving Spyro himself with only one hit left. But Sparks can replenish his health with a butterfly worth one hit back each, and there's plenty of tiny animals around every level that can be mercilessly murdered by Spyro, which will then turn into a butterfly only to be consumed by Sparks. There's no invincibility for getting any, but overall I do prefer this health system. A bigger variety of colours than just Aku Aku turning slightly redder. That and completing Spyro was a lot more fun, unless you're into the punishing difficulty of having to get every box in one go without dying. In Spyro, die and leave the level all you want. As long as you collect every gem, rescue every dragon, and retrieve every dragon egg in the game, which you can do at any time, you'll get your sweet
100%.
and you'll actually be rewarded with a whole new level where you get the satisfaction of killing more thieves and collecting a fuckload of gems till we get an extra cutscene of Spyro being interviewed again, until somehow dragons turn back into crystal, which is never explained or brought up again, but hey, I'll take it. Mainly because it's just fun to explore these open-ended levels and find everything. I still love the levels in Crash and their platforming, but Spyro needs a different and more intricate level design to work around the fact that he can just glide around. And as a result, we get these huge levels that all look beautiful and still hold up to this day. I love them both, but I think I'll take Spyro's art design and soundtrack over Crash's too. To be fair, Spyro's soundtrack for the first 4 games were done by Stuart Copeland from The Police, so you know it's going to be fire. You also need more incentive to collect things and have more to do than just finish levels when a balloonist wouldn't take you to the next hub world unless you saved a certain amount of dragons. Fuck the rest, I guess. Collected a certain amount of gems. You don't have to give them to him, just show him that you have them because he's a classist fuck. Or save a certain amount of dragon eggs. Again, not all of them. Just enough to make Tuco happy.
Tight, yeah!
Crash 1's bosses aren't exactly award-worthy. Papu Papu, you dodge stick and jump on head 3 times. Ripperoo, you gotta time these explosives to explode on him, so there's some creativity there at least. Koala Kong, you dodge these rocks and spin these ones back at him. Pinstripe, you shut up and wait, then go up and spin him. Brio's actually pretty cool. You kill his sapient phlegm and then you wouldn't like him when he's angry. And we spoke about Cortex, but he's decent. Dodge the blue and purple laser blobs and spin the green ones back at him. Yeah, they're perfectly fine boss battles, and I'd take them over Spyro 1s any day. Toasty, you flame, chase and flame. Dr. Shemp, you flame, chase and flame. Blowhard, you flame, chase and flame. Metalhead, you actually have to charge his power supplies when they aren't shocking you, so there's some improvement to the boss battles here. I hope the next one is further you flame, chase and flame. At least Nasty Nork has been built up as a mighty you get keys, then chase, flame, and then he dead. Obviously Crash 1 is winning the boss category, but overall I think I've made my point why I prefer Spyro. That, and really the only parts of Spyro 1 I find difficult are the flight levels, of which there's one in each hub world, having to flame or go through all these things before a strict timer runs out, and the treetops level. Whoever designed this level was mad at how easy the rest of the game was.
Yeah, well, you could have found an easier spot to get stuck.
This game knew exactly what it was doing, but aside from that, it's pretty great to get the hang of and not die in. Crash 1 can still remain a challenge even after playing it for 25 years, especially because of that save system. Now let's move on to the second game in each franchise. Crash 2 is considered by pretty much everyone a massive improvement to the already fun game in every way, and often the best Crash game of all time. And it came out just 13 months after the first. Spyro 2 is... well, it's my favourite game of all time for a reason, and again, considered by pretty much everyone to be a massive improvement in every way, and often the best Spyro game of all time, coming out 14 months after the first. So Spyro 2 had a whole 2 years on Crash 2 and an extra month after its respective sequel. I bet that came in handy. First and foremost, Crash 2 fixed the save system. You can now do it in any hub world, thank the Lord. Also, you get more of a story and you can actually see it when starting a new game, the time it makes the most sense to see it. Cortex is now funny, voiced by Clancy Brown with his lip sync to the dialogue.
I'm an enemy.
And there's a few scenes to set the story up. It starts Crash with his hero's journey.
Make yourself useful, big brother, and bring an extra battery for me.
To find a battery for his sister's laptop. But once you touch here, you are kidnapped from your home by Cortex quite easily. And he'll never use a tactic like this to capture Crash again for some reason. Cortex will convince you to go through each level and collect the purple crystal so he can save the world, though we already know that he's doing it for evil. So we play Crash the whole time knowing that collecting the crystals is actually the evil thing to do. Crash 2 is my favourite video game where you play the villain. Move over, Shadow of the Colossus, Undertale, God of War, Hitman, Jaws Unleashed, Destroy All Humans, Prototype, Star Wars Force Unleashed, Infamous 2, Grand Theft Auto, Last of Us Part 2, teehee, and Spec Ops: The Line. Crash Bandicoot, an anti-hero at best, is far more sinister than Kratos and company. Being the bad guy is worth it though, because these levels are what made Crash 1 so fun, but better. The level design is more intricate, there's more branching paths, though that is a detriment when it comes to collecting all the gems, because you'll have to backtrack to get every box with a camera very much not designed for Crash walking towards it. The There are a lot more gems this time around, and thank naughty gods you don't have to beat every level without dying to get each gem. You can die all you want, just make sure you get every box, and that's not all, there's even more gems with different ways of getting them. Definitely adds to the creativity, wonder, and exploration factor of this game, but for example, the blue gem can only be found if you go through the first level without breaking a single box. There's nothing in the game to even hint you toward this, so you have to rely on external information, such as the internet, but this was made in 1997, when 56 kilobytes per second was invented, for the few people who did have it. So word of mouth it was if any of your friends somehow found it out in the first place. I prefer that kind of thing when it comes to maybe what the final password in Crash 1 was to get 100% and just play any level you want, or in Spyro 1 when there's a little hidden beach over the cliff in Stone Hill where you can find the key for the locked chest in the level. That was all the talk back in Shell Harbour Primary School, but I was playing Crash 2 back then as well, as were we all, but nobody said shit about finding a sapphire by playing the boxes of lava, or the boxes of nitros rather. The remaining coloured gems can be found via secret routes, which are actually fun to find because they make sense, and by finishing this level on time. And at least the gems are part of the story now, as your boy Ripto is back telling you to get them instead of the crystals, because this game wanted to prepare the kids playing it for their parents' divorce, so collecting the gems does give you an extra ending that comes after you beat Cortex, not instead of it. You get to see all the gems you've collected instead of jumping on them, and then you use them to blow up Cortex's vortex, which leads into the opening cutscene of Crash 3. Something I didn't get until I was like 24 or something. Not the best reward for all the hard work it takes, but I'll fucking take it over the first ones. So yeah, like I said, there are actually some cutscenes in this game in the form of these floating heads trying to talk to Crash. It's not much, but it's the exact amount of story this game needs to fulfill its purpose and do better than the first one. Standard for a platformer sequel is the addition of vehicles, and where Crash 1 had a warthog to ride, this one has a motorboat, a jetpack, and a polar bear, so Crash can truly live up to his name. The bosses aren't much better than the prequels, with Ripto coming back lamer than his first fight, the Komodo brothers here to throw swords around while you just spin one of them, Tiny Tiger you gotta just jump on platforms till he Wile E. Coyotes himself, N.Sane you gotta avoid these laser beams as Wumpa Fruit magically shoots from his elbow if you press square for some reason, and then there's Cortex. The first fight against him was fine, but I'm sure you were waiting for the sequel to one-up that fight in so many ways, right? Well, here you go. I never finished Crash 2 and 4 Cortex till I was 24 years old in 2017, and here is actual footage of me playing this boss fight for the first time ever.
Chase him. You just have to just chase him, bro. Got him. Wow, that's
He's
it.
1/3 dead.
That's really that. That's it.
That's it.
That's fucking it.
Yeah.
Dude, this is like the
They don't even kill you.
You know what? This is the game version of like you getting like you can't like get an erection, and your girlfriend's like, get an erection now, and like when you finally get an erection, you come in 20 seconds. This is the video game version of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Coming Crash Bandicoot 2 is the
but after like after having like problems getting an erection, you get an erection, then you're just like, I'm done. That's this version. You fucking serious?
I did it. I beat Crash Bandicoot 2.
Yeah, probably the worst part of the game was the Cortex fight. It literally took me 39 seconds on my first ever try of it, but overall this is still a masterpiece entry in the 3D platformer genre. So how does Spyro 2 compare? Well, fortunately for my 30-year-old self, the game autosaves every time you go through a portal, and other than that you can do it literally at any point via the pause menu. Very based, Masterpiece Gaming, 10 out of 10. Spyro went from being voiced by one Nickelodeon star
What about Nasty Newark? I'm going after him.
to another,
Is this rain ever gonna stop? I've forgotten what the sun looks like.
and his personality is a lot more chill than the Sonic the Hedgehog-inspired boy we saw before. We're brought into the new world of Avalar where dragons don't exist, and find out that Allura, Hunter, and the suspiciously unnamed Professor have summoned Spyro here to help them defeat the dictator Ripto, an orange villain almost as fun as Cortex was in this era, voiced brilliantly by Greg Berger.
Were you trying to keep something from me? A dragon? You brought a dragon to Avalar? I hate dragons! Gah!
Actually, so was Hunter.
I got a little lost. Hey, I could do that. Why doesn't the dragon just torch Ripto?
Allura tells us to collect all the talismans in Avalar so we can get access to finding Ripto's henchmen. Once they're disposed of, Ripto the little pussy hides away in... well, now it's called Ripto's Arena. You need 40 of the game's 64 orbs to get in there and take him down. To collect all these talismans and orbs, you'll be finishing and exploring all these brilliant levels that I think are honestly some of the best levels that video gaming has to offer. Not only are they also perfectly designed for a character who charges and glides, but every level now has a bunch of friendly NPCs, uniquely designed to every stage with their own species and funny entertaining voice.
Unfortunately for us, a mob of lizards just showed up and started stealing all of our gems. The workers can break the locks if they can get to the doors.
In order to get to the building over there, you can first jump on the windmill, then jump to the near side of the building.
They all seem to somehow know exactly who Spyro is, even though Spyro just got to Avalar for the first time.
Hi, Spyro!
Hi, Spyro.
Spyro, was it?
Spyro! Spyro, you did it! Spyro!
Oh, Spyro.
Spyro!
Spyro?
Hi, Spyro.
Alright, Spyro.
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 Spyro!
Hello, Spyro. Spyro.
Hey, Spyro!
Spyro. Spyro.
Ah, Spyro, a friendly face.
Spyro. Howdy, Spyro.
Spyro.
And they start the level telling you the story of what's going on here, and often other characters of the same type or completely unique characters will be at the end of the level, rewarding you with a talisman or orb and opening up the portal to skedaddle on out of there. Or they'll be offering up side missions you can complete for an orb, which I think is the main thing Spyro 2 has on one. Each mission has a difficulty rating of 5 stars and is such a fun way to expand the concept of Spyro levels and variety of gameplay. Not to mention the dialogue and voice acting provided by these characters are just hilarious, and I've only come to appreciate them more and more over the past 23 years. Not only that, but every single level besides the speedways have an intro and outro cutscene, with the obvious exception of the first level, Glimmer, since its intro is the first cutscene of the game. None of these scenes have dialogue purely told by the visuals and sound effects. They show the enemies of the level coming to life, the locals having to put up with the enemy shit, the locals getting fucking murdered by volcanoes, etc. While the outro cutscene of every level involves the locals becoming friends with the enemies, the locals getting revenge of the enemies, or the locals fucking murdering each other. And honestly, most of these with the 1999 graphics that show dry, vacant expressions and the complete randomness of some of the shit that goes on, they're funny as fuck and still make me laugh out loud, often in disbelief to this day. With main story cutscenes happening before and after every boss fight too, every level also has a power up that you need to defeat a certain amount of enemies for, so Spyro does get to fly, supercharge, and get fucking launched in certain levels. But the main draw for Spyro 2, for me at least, is the 100% completion. It is my absolute favourite game to complete, as getting all 10,000 gems in the game and all 64 orbs leads you to a super flame power up. There's plenty of these in the game too, but this one is permanent. Once you walk through it, every flame you shoot is now going the distance and can break through what a normal flame and charge simply cannot, making going back to do certain missions really fun now that you're OP. Best completion bonus ever, truly. Not every mission to get an orb is great, admittedly, there are some that are just flat out tedium, but there's so much fun and charm to every level, there's always a good mission right around the corner. It's always clear what to do, it's just a matter of if you can do it. Thanks to the Master of Education Moneybag, Spyro can now learn to swim, which blew me and my brother's mind in 1999 when we read about that in a PlayStation magazine before the game came out, as we were used to Spyro drowning in a shallow end in the first game. Moneybags can also teach you to climb ladders and use the head bash move, so collect those gems to learn these moves and also be led across bridges, etc. Good incentive to collect stuff along the way, same as doors and levels needing a certain amount of orbs to activate. There's only 3 bosses, but I'll take any of them over any of the Spyro 1 bosses. Crush, Gulp, and especially the final boss of Ripto are pretty dope boss fights and shit all over Crash 2's.
There! I think I made my point.
Now for the third entry in each franchise. Both are generally accepted as bigger, yet not as good as their predecessor due to reliance on vehicle segments and less platforming. But honestly, I think Crash Warped is my favourite of the trilogy. There's one hub world, but segmented into 5 sections with 5 levels and a boss, plus a dope-ass secret area with 5 stages of its own, each with a specific amount of relics you must get to unlock them. More on relics later. The concept of the hub world being a time machine and each type of level being a different era, country, or theme is amazing. And there's just the one way to save your game, but you're always right near it with access to it. Another simple but effective story to set up the game: the destroyed Vortex releases Akawaku's brother Uka Uka from this temple, and it turns out he's an old mate of Cortex. Akawaku simply hears Uka Uka laugh in the distance and is finally given a voice, not to mention any form of character at all outside of being Crash's health counter. So you gotta go through every level, collect the crystal, defeat Cortex's minions on the way, then defeat Cortex and Uka Uka to finish the game. Then you gotta get every gem and relic and fight them again to get the true ending and complete the game. So Crash Warp gets a lot of flack for an overabundance of vehicle levels and less platforming than Crash 2, and it's true. Out of the 32 levels in the game, not including the bosses, only 16 of them are straightforward Crash doing platforming levels, so exactly half of them. The rest involve Crash swimming, Coco riding a jet ski, Coco riding a tiger, etc. Yep, you heard me, you get to play as Crash's sister Coco for the first time. Not that she gets to do any platforming for herself, hell, she doesn't even get to have any lines. But I actually praise the levels in Crash Warp because those 16 platforming levels are some of the best in the franchise. Particularly the Egyptian and Arabian themed levels, I love those ones. But we also get to run from dinosaurs, jump on fat guys with two heads, and explore the distant future, which I'm sure is what game developers in 1998 thought 2023 would look like. As for the rest of the levels, as far as swimming levels go, I quite like it. I love the Tiger on the Great Wall of China levels, I like the motorbike levels, I like the jet ski levels. I even kinda like the plane shooter levels, probably because there's only two of them and these levels are spaced out between each other a lot. When playing through Crash Warped, there's never a level I don't look forward to, which I may have done if we had like 3 swimming levels in a row, but it all seems to balance out perfectly, just adding variety to Crash's adventure on the way and spicing it up as opposed to stalling it. The only cutscenes we get before the final one are these messages that the bosses and Akawaku are somehow communicating to us, and then the boss having something important to say before most of them.
Break out the butter. We're gonna make toast.
Now you're on my time, you little skunk! Give me the crystals!
Crash Bandicoot for the last time! Give the crystals to me!
Speaking of the bosses, these are definitely the best Crash bosses we've seen by far at this point. Tiny's pretty simple, but Dingo Dial is dope as fuck. Tropy is really neat, shooting at engine shakes things up a bit, and fighting Cortex while the Mask Brothers are fighting is quite difficult and shits all over the last Cortex fights for sure. Better yet, after defeating each one, Crash gets a power-up. He gets more than 3 and doesn't have to purchase them from a pompous bear, but he still cannot swim nor climb. But the first power-up he gets is equivalent to Spyro's head bash, I guess. He can use it to break tougher item containers that he simply could not do before, not that there were any before. You only see them once you've learned it already, which takes some of the wonder out of Crash as well. Spyro 2 had the benefit of you exploring levels before you have a chance to learn all these skills, giving you a reason to come back later and finally get to do a mission you couldn't before, something that I think really adds to the game. With Crash Warp, the replayability of levels is knocked up a notch, however, with the aforementioned relics. Once you've beaten a level, you can play it again, and if you so much as touch this big yellow stopwatch circulating in front of you, it's time trial time, where you gotta finish the level under a certain amount of time to get a relic. Each level has 3 tiers of relics: Sapphire, Gold, and Platinum. Sapphire is the easiest to get, and that's all you need to unlock 5 of the extra stages, but you gotta get at least all the golds to get 100%. Well, 105%.
That's impossible. No one can give more than 100%. By definition, that is the most anyone can give.
Spyro and Crash don't care about your Simpsons logic. That being said, it isn't until you beat Cortex and Uka Uka the first time that you get the final power-up of the ability to run fast. Just look at him sprint! The other power-ups you get along the way are the double jump, super spin, and a fucking gun.
How should I kill this guy?
This guy?
Yeah.
With a gun.
Alright.
Oh! Oh! You have a gun?
These power-ups might be the main reason I prefer Warped over Cortex Strikes Back. You can just shoot chickens now. But in general, I just find this super-powered Crash the most fun to play. There are also 2 secret levels not in the secret warp room and can be found within other levels. One is by hitting this alien sign in a motorbike level. I can actually fuck with that, that's a cool little secret I can see not being too hard to find. But the other you find by getting carried away by one of the pterodactyls in the dinosaur level. One of the many pterodactyls that you actively must avoid every other time with no indication this pterodactyl is any bloody different, and from my immediate memory, I couldn't even tell you which dinosaur level it is. Let alone which pterodon is kind-hearted enough to take you to Egebus Rex so you can complete the game without 1998 dial-up cheats. And all that just for a tiny end cutscene where Cortex and Uka Uka get sucked into this blob. Kawaku says one line since nobody else is legally allowed to say a fucking word in this game, and then Baby Cortex and Baby Trophy overpower this all-powerful evil that had to be sealed away because he was so dangerous. Not the greatest completion bonus, pretty on par with Crash 2 and obviously better than Crash 1. Other than that, it's just bragging rights really.
See, look, it's my only 105% save file.
Which is also the sole reason to get every platinum relic in the game, something I've never even bothered attempting, but just finishing the game itself is some of the most fun you can have in a Crash game. The best boss fights, the best power-ups, the best Crash game in my opinion. That may very well change once I finally play Crash 4, but you get me. So now on to Spyro 3. While there are plenty of vehicles to use in this game, entire levels aren't based on them. Spyro 3 is huge compared to the other two. I think the quickest I've completed both Spyro 1 and 2 is 5 hours each. The quickest I've completed Spyro 3 is 13 hours. While some of Spyro 3's level design is lost by having every minigame / mission happen in its own little portal, it makes up for it by having every level become a loop. By finishing each level, something happens to connect the start and end of every level, making very easy access from then on. Obviously based on my previous statements, I prefer Spyro 2, but credit where credit's due, Spyro 3 is a fucking amazing game that does take the Spyro franchise to the next gosh darn level. 4 hub worlds, which is more than Spyro 2 had, yet less than Spyro 1 had. 4 big levels in each, plus a level for a new character in each, plus another speedway in each, plus a boss battle after each, plus a Sparks level in each. And this time, instead of rescuing adult dragons or collecting orbs / talismans, your main MacGuffins are now dragon eggs. Much bigger and wider than those little pink dragon eggs from the first game. Plus, these ones hatch whenever you go near them. Spyro just has that way with kids, I guess. He also names all of them without the parents' permission. What a Chad. The story is the tiniest bit media this time around. The eggs are stolen by this wascally rabbit and the Rhinoc army in the opening cutscene for a sorceress from
the Forgotten Worlds.
Spyro, Sparks and Hunter go through this hole into the underground and end up right here. On the way, Spyro rescues these trapped animals caged by Moneybags, who's now voiced by Neil Ross, trading his posh English accent in for a posh American one, and it's my favourite Moneybags rendition. He just sounds so sleazy.
My business went into a slump after you left, so I came here and struck up a nice deal with the local sorceress. Lovely woman she is. I hope you appreciate this favor I'm doing in letting you out. I found one of the dragon eggs and I'm going to sell it for a fortune back in Avalar.
These animals become the aforementioned playable characters, which gives you a lot more variety than being like, oh, I can play Crash Bandicoot in this game, watch her as she rides things Crash could ride. Sheila the kangaroo jump high, Sergeant Bird the penguin fly and shoot rocket, Bentley the Yeti smash with club, and Agent 9 the monkey shoot laser gun. Sparks also turns into a fucking arsenal. So yeah, the locals talk about how dragons haven't inhabited these realms in many, many years, and as a result, the magic in the worlds have been gradually diminishing, which comes back little by little when you rescue the baby dragons from their embryo prisons, which is a really cool story way to justify needing to collect certain things to unlock levels. Bianca the Sorceress Apprentice Rabbit gets some character development as she slowly turns from the sorceress after learning that she just wants to kill the baby dragons for their wings, and ends up falling for the hunky hunter and joining their side. After all this build-up of Spyro foiling the villain's plans, you fight her without ever having a word of dialogue with her, and then kill her.
Or do you?
You are given a decent end to the game with all the main characters making appearances, but of course Spyro acknowledges that there's more eggs to rescue. First thing you do then is chase down Moneybags and reclaim every single gem you've given him over the course of the game. Doing it yourself is much more satisfying than it is being told to you via a cutscene in Spyro 2. So once you've gotten all 149 eggs and 15,000 gems you get access into the super bonus round. A whole new level reminiscent of the 100% bonus level in Spyro 1, except with its own minigame missions you need to beat in order to then access this door and fight the sorceress one last time. Your sworn enemy who tried to murder your people's children who you thought once dead has come back to settle the score. What kind of epic scene awaits us upon her return?
I don't know how she did it, Spyro, but the sorceress must have survived that last battle.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
Still no words from neither Spyro nor her, you just kill her again, and I guess pink ooze are what kills hippos and not lava. While you unfortunately don't get permanent Super Flame for some stinky reason, this final bonus world is pretty dope and does outdo the Crash completion bonuses. Hell, every level in this game is relatively huge. So much to explore, so many eggs to find, so many eggs to earn via so many minigame missions, so many portals where you play as one of the other characters. The differing themes of levels are so cool, each one with a unique art style that make them all stand out and look beautiful. There's more cutscenes to enjoy for the main story, though unfortunately no intro/outro cutscenes for each level. You're lagging behind Spyro 3. The bosses are pretty decent, not quite on Crash Warp's level, but still loads better than Spyro 1's. Maybe better than Spyro 2's as well, since there are only 3 of those. There's 5 main boss battles this time around, as well as a couple of missions and levels where you have bosses too, such as this Rhinoc and a shark, and this Rhinoc and a sleeping cap, all of which are quite fun. The first Sorcerer's fight is a pain in the ass, and the second one is quite anticlimactic. Spike is only a second story boss, but he's probably the hardest, putting on a damn good challenge. Your reason for coming back to levels isn't because of your superpowers this time, because Spyro still retains the ability to swim, climb, and head bash. The levels must be replayed so you can do these missions once you've rescued the captive animal for them. While it's fun to meet and control new characters, this game overall still doesn't have quite the charm that Spyro 2 did. Whether that be because of the lack of level cutscenes, the locals of each level not being quite as quirky as Spyro 2's, or the final fight between hero and villain being quite lame, especially compared to Spyro v Ripto. It just goes to show that bigger doesn't always mean better. While Spyro skateboarding is less cringy than it sounds, I think it's less the few vehicle segments that drag the dragon's pace down like people say happens in Crash Warped, but more so the other character segments. They're not in every level, but there's still a lot of them, and none of them can match Spyro's speed, especially Bentley. But you still always know what to do, with no secret pterodactyls required to find a gosh darn hidden level. I'd still put Spyro 3 above all the Crash games. Sorry Crash, even my second favourite Spyro game beats you. In my defense, this game is still incredible, even if it is a slog to complete compared to Spyro 2, and if any Spyro 4 does happen, it'll have a hard time beating this one. So these trilogies are both amazing and are still the main games one would and should think of when it comes to each franchise. Crash with its fun difficulty and linear levels, but often with an annoying twist to get 100% completion. Spyro with its huge explorable areas, items to find, and missions to complete, made only more satisfying when you do find everything. So far, Spyro has had a different villain in each game, where Crash's nemesis and final boss is Cortex every time. I think I've made my point why I think the Purple Dragon has the better games overall, at least when it comes to the original trilogies, as like I said earlier, there's a lot of sequels involved. And in all fairness, Crash may very well have it beat there. For starters, Crash Team Racing is a masterclass in kart races that could teach Mario a thing or two. Crash Bash can be fun if you're playing multiplayer for about 10 to 20 minutes, and other than that, could really use some lessons from Mario Party in return for the kart racing tips. But my next point of comparison will be the first game for each on PS2, Crash Bandicoot The Wrath of Cortex, and Spyro Enter the Dragonfly. I have finished Wrath of Cortex before, back in 2006 or 2007, and may have picked it back up once or twice since then, whereas Enter the Dragonfly I borrowed once in 2005 and nearly finished it, but really couldn't be bothered and gave it back to the guy who lent it to me by choice. I was 12. I should have adored playing a new gen sequel to my favourite game series, but man, even prepubescent me wasn't having any of this shit. But the point remains that it's been like 15 years since I've properly played Wrath of Cortex and 18 years since I've even touched Enter the Dragonfly. So before I write any more of this script, I'll be playing these again with my new PS2 I just got for my 30th birthday. Okay, just played the first hour or so of Wrath of Cortex, and honestly, it's fine. I mean, it's bad when it comes to the fact that it's the first Crash that had a next-gen jump, so you'd expect a much better experience, when in reality, I think it's not even as good as any of the PS1 Crash games, except maybe Crash Bash, and maybe Crash 1. Nah, Crash 1's still cool. Even though this is PS2, the character animations are worse, the controls are worse, the level designs are worse, the cutscenes and dialogue are worse, the boss battles are worse. Basically, it all seems like a rushed Crash Warped clone. So while it isn't terrible, it is ultimately disappointing. It's like they added a lot more boxes to break in every level and were like, next gen! But in a vacuum, it's fine. It's a decent platformer on its own. You get to jump and spin and all that stuff. I will say this, the soundtrack is an absolute banger. I could write rap lyrics to pretty much every track. The bosses are, well, they're all Crash Bandicoot, and they can range from annoying to annoyingly hard. But at least the superpower rewards are back, all the same ones from Warp to here, and we even get a new one. Sneak. The ability to go very slow, which is only handy in subsequent levels so you can sneak on nitros without them exploding. It's the first superpower in the game you get too. Who did you think you were winning over here, Wrath of Cortex? A new playstyle is rolling around in this ball, which is honestly pretty fun, even if the first boss is used with it. And Cortex is the main villain again. They even got a bunch of celebrities to voice act the elemental masks like Mark Hamill.
On the contrary, Aku Aku, it spells disaster for you and that precious planet you care so much about.
Force is strong in my family.
Ali Ermi.
They're gonna have to hang you out to dry when I get through with you!
You had best unfuck yourself or I will unscrew your head and shut down your neck!
Tom Wilson.
What are you looking at, fuzzhead?
What are you looking at, butthead?
And Jess Harnell.
The Crash Bandicoot, eh? Oh, I've heard so much about you, and this is the hero I have to blow.
Who's that little bear?
Oh, that's no little bear. That's my brother.
Well, Jess did later play both Spyro
years ago. Huh. What are dark gems?
And Crash in different games. And he is voice acting royalty, so a celebrity in his own right. Plus, one of my favourite voice actors, Kevin Michael Richardson, is the debut voice for Crash Bandicoot here, and he's always a welcome addition.
The water boy and I are gonna take you out. Ooh, I'm gonna rip you limb from limb.
When he's given better dialogue, but ultimately the first generational upgrade for the Crash series is quite the mid-disappointment. So that surely means that Spyro's first generational upgrade has little competition and will surely win, right? 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 Okay, I just played an hour and 10 minutes of Spyro Enter the Dragonfly. I really needed to refamiliarize myself with this game because I only ever played it in 2005 when I borrowed it from my friend's uncle. Even at 12 years old, I was pretty disappointed with the game and gave it back to the uncle without bothering to finish it. So here we are, 18 years later, and what do I think? It's so much worse than I could possibly have registered as a preteen. Even one who worshipped the ground Spyro glided above since I were a wee lad of 6, playing the first one at my dad's place and got 2 and 3 as soon as they came out as Christmas presents. I'm so happy none of my Christmases were ruined by this piece of shit. The downgrade for Spyro's first PS2 effort is so much worse than what Crash got. This is just a plain bad game in any context. Really all you can say for the graphics upgrade of both is that they're less pixely and smoother. That's it, because the graphics in Enter the Dragonfly are just embarrassing. Spoiler alert, I may not have played any of the Spyro Game Boy games except Orange nor Skylanders, but I can very confidently say this is the worst Spyro game. Everything isn't just worse, the character animations are awful, the controls are terrible, the level designs aren't inherently bad, but so long and drawn out compared to original Trilogy. Thank God there's only 8 levels, but that's hardly a compliment to the game. Spyro 1 has 29 levels across 6 hub worlds, Spyro 2 has 26 levels across 3 hub worlds, Spyro 3 has 33 levels across 4 hub worlds, and the first Spyro to ditch the 700 megabyte limitations and work with a full 4 gigabyte disc? 8 levels across 1 hub world. Now like I said, I only just played 70 minutes and believe it or not, I didn't even stop playing because I was sick of it. Game crashed as soon as I started talking to this dude, but probably a very happy accident. So I've still never finished this game, but I do plan to one day just for the fuck of it. And I guess it's 9 levels if you include the one singular only boss level. If you thought the boss battles in Spyro 2 were scarce, no crush and gulp in this one, only your boy Ripto. I can't comment on the quality of the fight because I've never played it, but hey, watching this it looks better than literally every Spyro 1 boss at least. But overall, this game clearly wasn't just a rushed Spyro 2 or 3 clone, it is an absolutely unfinished Spyro 2 or 3 clone. There's really nothing I can recommend about it. Spyro getting the abilities of different breaths is a definitely neat idea, but the first one you get is just a bubble to catch the main collectible in the game, the dragonflies. Imagine needing a skill to free each dragon from Crystal in Spyro 1 or just to touch the orbs and dragon eggs. This brand new ability is just a pain in the ass if anything, and it's only for the dragonflies that decide to fly away from you anyway. Bro, why are you taunting me? I'm trying to save you. Wait, why am I trying to save you? You were right here anyway. This is the last game Stuart Copeland would do for Spyro till the Reignited Trilogy 16 years later, and he did not go out with a bang. Not that the soundtrack is terrible by any means, but it certainly is a bit lackluster compared to the first 3 games. So it's no saving grace for how slow and unresponsive Spyro is this time around, which is unforgivable in a Spyro game. All the same voice actors are back to voice Spyro, Sparks, Hunter/Ripto, Bianca, Zoe, and Moneybags, who was only in the game once? What's the point of collecting all these gems then? And now Crush and Gulp can suddenly talk. Hell, why are any of them even alive?
Somehow Palpatine.
Way to Ripto retcon my favourite game into the Dragonfly, you dick. Anyway, none of the charm, charisma, or humour from the other games is here.
It could be your density. I mean, your destiny. Now, I will open that gate. That, it appears, is my density. I mean, destiny, Spyro.
Way to just take a joke from Back to the Future and execute it terribly.
Brought you together. My density has brought me to you. I'm your density. I mean, your destiny.
At least it's cool that the adult dragons in this level are all named after Asian martial art actors like Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan, Jet Li, Chow Yun-Fat, Patton Oswalt.
Now, I want you to remember that no bastard ever won a war by dying for his country. He won it by making the other poor dumb bastard die for his country.
Look, when it comes to the whole Crash v Spyro thing I've got going on here, this is the first round in which Crash demolishes Spyro. I will happily play all the Wrath of Cortex again before acknowledging Enter the Dragonfly even exists. Okay, next up is a favourite of mine, Crash Twinsanity. I've often said this is my favourite Crash game, and I keep going between this, Warped, and since it came out, About Time. Spoiler alert, I'm picking Warped between these two. I have played it several times since high school, but I still took the opportunity to play an hour of it again. I don't know why my 2023 eyes are so much fresher than my 2017 ones, but this game is also infamous for just being unfinished. A lot less unfinished than Enter the Dragonfly, but a lot more glitchy. It was a hassle to just get past this part where you control a ball of Crash and Cortex slapping each other because I either randomly fall through the floor or my spin point hit these crystals, and worst yet, in this boss with the Tiki Idol. Of the hour and 5 minutes I spent playing this game, 21 minutes were trying to beat this guy, which I eventually gave up. And as you'll see on Only Plays, if you touch the dead body after beating him, you have to fight him again.
What? What?
Oh my god!
What? No! Are you fucking kidding?
Oh man.
No!
In my many playthroughs of this game I've had between 2004 and 2017, I've never had a problem with him. But this time, I could very rarely actually throw Cortex in his mouth like we're supposed to. Even at age 12 I could get this guy straight in, and I've only ever played it on actual PS2, so there's no difference in this playthrough. Certainly dampened my experience with what has always been a fantastic game to me. My memories of this game, and most of my recent hour playing it, are very fond. It breaks the Crash formula in just the right way. You still control more or less the exact same, but the world is much more open now and actually story-based. And what a story! Nothing genius or deep, but genuinely entertaining and funny. Lex Lang started voicing Cortex here, and as brilliant as Clancy Brown is...
Great! Ooga, it was that infernal Bandicoot!
Lex is just the perfect Cortex.
Surprised to see me, Crash? Like the fleas in your fur, I keep coming back. 3 years I spent alone in the frozen Antarctic wastes. And I missed you. And so I've organized a little gathering, like a birthday party, except the exact opposite. And look, all of your friends are here. You are so very popular. Let's start handing out the presents.
I've always thought so, and I was glad to find out in more recent years that the rest of the world seems to agree. I genuinely believe that Lang's performance as Cortex, especially in Twinsanity, is one of my favourite video game performances of all time, and it really makes Cortex my favourite character in the franchise. So much of the dialogue in the cutscenes brilliantly parodies video game tropes, especially those of platformers, such as enemy movement and doing NPCs random favours for very convenient rewards. Reception on this game was pretty mixed, and understandably so, as there's so much good and then a fair amount of shit about the game.
I've never been so humiliated. No amount of treasure could ever begin to compensate.
Treasure, eh? Bonza.
The good outweighs the bad for me though. I do love this game. It's what the first generational jump for Crash Bandicoot should have been. I just wish it was properly finished, because you do notice a cutscene or two missing where you'd think there would be one. But hey, even Spyro 3 had that. You still need gems for 100% completion, but each one actually comes with concept art or an animation, and there's no wacky rule to obtain them. You just gotta find them and touch them. They're the only collectible in this game too, as the boxes aren't counted for anything but dispensing Aku Aku and Wumpa Fruit, which is still just used for health and lives. But I remember my stepmom borrowing this from Video Easy, and then my brother and I played it for a bit. When my stepmom asked if it was any good, I told her it was already the best Crash Bandicoot game, and she was very surprised. Hell, someone just flat out said that I can't pick Twinsanity as my favourite Crash game since it's so unfinished. But fucking watch me. But no, I still prefer Warped and what I've seen of Crash Bandicoot 4. To be fair, the platforming and controls definitely aren't as defined as they should be. The platforming is fun, but would have been a lot better and less frustrating with a more responsive Crash who actually knew where he was going. But the soundtrack? Perhaps one of the most unique soundtracks in video game history. Every single track was done by a cappella group Spyro Mouth. An all a cappella soundtrack? That might sound awful to you if you're a basic bitch, but it's amazing what this group can do. Every track actually sounds different from one another. They're so catchy and well made. Even when... especially when they do renditions of famous classical pieces like Flight of the Bumblebee. The Blue Danube Waltz. And Hebrides Overture. The bosses are fun and varied. You fight Cortex while he continues with the very quotable dialogue. You immediately then face N.Sane and his new Mecha Bandicoot. The next boss then is the Tiki Idol, who still makes my blood boil now just looking at him. While many classic Crash villains come back for a boss battle war throughout this adventure, as well as a few new characters. There's no power-ups to gain this time around, but you do get different playstyles. Your standard Crash, the aforementioned Crash and Cortex Ball, which is kinda like the Wrath of Cortex Ball, but kinkier. You get to play as Crash pulling Cortex around via the crystal and use him as a weapon to surpass Metal Gear. You can later play as the Madman himself and eventually his niece, Nina Cortex. You can be Crash using Cortex as a snowboard, which is fun as shit. You even get to pilot Mecha Bandicoot yourself for the final boss. Quentin Flynn does a great job at voicing both the evil twins with great nuance, as well as N.Sane.
That feels good. How are you fools before the awesome might of the evil twins? Yes, we are rich!
While Dwight Schultz, who is literally on the 18, does Dingo Dial.
Lunch?
Papu Papu.
Mabo
And this rusty walrus guy.
Ah, yummy! Fresh meat for my pot.
The whole cast does a great job at the best Crash Bandicoot script yet. Overall, it's definitely a game I wish were better, but I still absolutely love it, despite how frustrating it was to try and play through the Academy of Evil on Rusty's ship again. And hey, Cortex isn't the main villain this time. Let's see if Spyro's second main game outing on the PS2 can compete. Spyro A Hero's Tale. My stepmom also rented this game in 2004, which is also how I first played it, and was probably ready to call this the best Spyro game at the time too. It also really should have been the first Spyro game of this generation. Best part is, as far as I can tell, it's fully finished. Now I'm stupid and got up to this ball section here, what did I say about Spyro always stealing from Crash, got to the end of it, then headed back to the entrance because I didn't know that's how you got further into the game. I thought it was an isolated ball section and then wondered where the hell you go next. Luckily in 2006, a whole 2 years later, I randomly decided to exit the ball section via the exit, and then actually found myself in a new level. I very quickly made it up to the final area of the game, then my memory card erased my file and I genuinely don't believe I've played it since. I've been so mad these past 16 years that I just couldn't bear to pick it up again. But here I am now at age 30, ready to take another look at it. And it's a shame I only committed to an hour or so of going back to each game I hadn't played in years because I really wanted to keep going. In fact, I did. I played this one for an hour and a half, getting up to that level I didn't find until 2006. I loved this game when I was 12 to 14, and I can absolutely see why. Much like Crash Twinsanity, I put this on my birthday and or Christmas wishlist ASAP, and got them in record time. That being said, it's not all wonderful news. The fact that every Spyro PlayStation game before this had square as charge and circle as flame when a hero's tail swaps those two around should be considered a hate crime. And as someone so used to the main trilogy's controls, having to remember to swap those around was a pain in the ass and led to some awkward situations. And the fact that the head bash move, now called horn dive for some reason, is done with a double jump then circle instead of the classic single jump then triangle, literally led me to my death. Also, yeah, you can double jump in this one. It's actually how you glide too, when you can't even do that until you talk to the first Dragon Elder. But other than that, this is still a very good game. The characters, even if slightly redesigned, are really charming and funny. This game also pokes fun at the platformer genre with great jokes about arbitrary collectibles.
You'll need to collect 8 power stars.
Power stars? Never even heard of those.
Oh. Then how about red coins? No? Heart pieces? Gold tokens? I'm at a loss, Spyro. What exactly do you need to collect?
I don't know. Light gems?
Fine. You need 8 light gems.
Repetitive boss battles.
All I have to do is run around you a few times while I figure out your weakness. Then I just hit you 3 times
and main character mortality.
Spyro's still alive. I know, because if he weren't, we'd be going back to a previous save. I rock.
Tom Kenny didn't come back as Spyro, but as said earlier, Jess Harnell is a wonderful, really funny voice actor and gives Spyro humour that we've never seen before nor since.
Wow, 1 million brain cells? That seems excessively destructive. That seems kind of bad. Okay, it's cool.
Actually, Andrei Sogliuzzo as Sparks and Michael J. Guff as Nasty Nork are the only returning voice actors for this game. But from Harnell to Tara Strong, everyone is brilliant and funny in this game, which might be the best script Spyro has had, at least in terms of comedy. Despite the buttons doing the wrong things, Spyro controls really well again, which is a huge relief after Enter the Dragonfly. Every level is epic, and there's so many collectibles to get in each of them. And hey, there's more than 8. There's 18. And I look forward to playing them all again one day soon, and hopefully actually finishing it this time. I haven't fought any of the bosses in over 16 years, so I won't comment on them, even though I do remember who each one was. Honestly, this game seems to be copying Naughty Dog's first post-Crash game, Jak and Daxter the Precursor Legacy, more than any Crash game here, and I think that Spyro Hero's Tale is nearly as good as it. I can't remember what the different breath abilities are like, but I can at least promise you they're fucking better than what Enter the Dragonfly had to offer. More notable is actually the different characters you play as, who get their own mini-games in each world. Sergeant Bird does the equivalent of the speedways and flights from the original trilogy, but he shoots down his targets with rockets. Newcomer Blink the Mole destroys dark shards with bombs. I haven't played Hunter or Spark since 2006, but they get their sections too. I'd probably like them all a lot more if they didn't take so damn long. They get a dragon egg first and then do a longer version of what they just did to get a light gem. Way too long in my opinion, especially because they're fairly more difficult than what Spyro has to do. Despite having nothing to do with Stuart Copeland, the soundtrack's a banger and tops his work on Enter the Dragonfly. Nasty Nork is back, which means that he's survived getting toast in Spyro 1.
Nasty Nork? Didn't I defeat that guy years ago?
Yes, now let's never explain how or why he's here now.
Somehow.
And the new main villain is actually another dragon. Spicy. Nice to see a new villain in the video game franchise. He's also voiced by Jess Harnell. Must Spyro truly face his worst enemy? Himself? To be fair, Harnell also voices Hunter, Tomas, and Moneybags in this one. Yeah, previous Spyro characters do return, and some funky cool characters appear for the first and last time. Honestly, I thought Crash Twinsanity had this round in the bag, but I'm actually having trouble picking between Twinsanity and Hero's Tale. Dare I say, a tie? I mean, I finished Twinsanity a few times and A Hero's Tale not even once, so I suppose that speaks volumes, but I can't stop thinking about how awful that fight with the Tiki Man was, and how frustrating certain other levels were. But look, if I take that out of it, because there might be a Hero's Tale boss that pisses me off too, I think I'll have to give this one to Twinsanity, which is interesting because that means I prefer the Crash games on the PS2 generation over the Spyro ones, 2 out of 2 thus far. Before I move on to the next main Crash game, I'll also point out that I'm also a big fan of Crash Nitro Kart, which is of course another kart race to follow up Crash Team Racing, though not as legendary. But Crash Tag Team Racing fucking sucks. You know a racing game is bad when the platforming in the game between races is literally more fun than the races themselves. Speaking of things that are more fun than another, here we have Crash of the Titans. Basically a reboot for the entire Crash series, attempting to turn it into its own kind of franchise. Though, it does still follow on from previous games. Kinda. I'll address the elephant in the room immediately. Not only does Crash have tribal tattoos to make him more like Dwayne Johnson or someone, I don't know, this is what Uka Uka looks like now. This big terrifying full wooden plank mask now looks like something you could kill in Final Fantasy with one ice attack. And even worse is what they did to my boy Tiny Tiger. See this big, gruff, dumb, brutal Tasmanian tiger?
Crash! Coco!
Now they give us this.
Crash, I really am cross with you. I'm just trying to do my job, and you go and cause all this chaos. I'm sorry, but I'm gonna have to eat your face.
A big, lisping, sensitive, awkward Siberian tiger who sounds like Mike Tyson. If they wanted to introduce this guy as a new character, that would have been cool, but how dare they call him Tiny Tiger. The rest of the character redesigns are fine, I guess. I still prefer the old ones, but at least they didn't completely butcher them like they did with Uka and Tiny, demolishing any scary presence they might have had. And even apart from that, I've never really liked this game. In fact, I'll say it now, it's my least favourite main series Crash game. It may beat Crash Bash and Tag Team Racing, but I'm honestly not even sure about committing to that. So I played an hour and 20 minutes of this game because I hadn't played it at all since, like, 2008. It's completely finished and polished and everything. Shame everything they finished and polished kinda sucks. I almost wish the game was more glitchy because at least that'd be something different. Even after only 80 minutes I got really tired of this game and its repetitive nature. I played 4 levels and they all just felt the same. And this isn't a new perspective I have either, I've always felt this way about the game. It was such a slog to get through that I'm surprised I did persevere and end up finishing it back in the day. I actually enjoyed the first level. Crash's speed and jumps were a lot of fun to control, so I actually enjoy the platforming elements of this game. Shame it also immediately takes a backseat to just repeatedly fighting these monsters and then controlling them. That's literally like the whole point of the game. These are the Titans from the title, and they are not as fun as they sound. Even as a 16-year-old who was hardly a nitpicky critic, I was so bored of the constant fighting and possessing of these guys, and the portrayal of everything Crash was to control was quite off-putting too. Like I said, I love the speed and height at which you platforms around here, but at what cost? You now fight enemies by hitting them, you can spin but you have to learn it first, and it's by spinning the left analog stick around, and then Crash becomes dizzy and can't move for a few seconds. This guy dizzy? You can also use it to glide like Spyro. Aha! Caught ya! Aku Aku is no longer your health meter, and instead you have a health bar which can be replenished with Wumpa Fruit, so the main scatter collectible is actually now these blue blobs called Mojo. And the plot is that the evil scientist Dr. Something is trying to steal the good guy's Mojo. Wait, isn't that just the plot to Austin Powers 2? Anyway, it breaks the Crash formula in the absolute wrong way. You really might as well not be playing Crash at all. The story, dialogue and humour is still quite on point, not quite Twinsanity levels, but the hilarious voice acting, the quite funny lines are still there. Thankfully Lex Lang is back as Cortex, while now Jess Harnell is voicing your boy Crash, and now sorta speaks?
Pancakes!
Reg Eagles has taken over for Aku Aku, which makes sense given the more comedic take this game has on him, although the late great Mel Winkler will forever be the Aku Aku we know and love. But there's no denying that Eagles is really funny as the colourful mask. As much as I hate their designs, John DiMaggio and Chris Williams are good at these renditions of Uka and Tiny, with Williams also doing a very Mr. T inspired Crash Bandicoot.
Make us suck up what? You don't even got a body! I'm just gonna stay here a while.
And iconic serious voice actor Nolan North strikes gold with his take on Engine.
Thank you again! Hotter than the first!
Reception on this game was also pretty mixed, but I think these scores are generally too nice, as the bad outweighs the good in this game, at least in my opinion. Even in a vacuum and not worrying about how much of a Crash game it is, I still think it's a pretty boring and repetitive gameplay experience and not a very good start to this series they attempted to make, which spawned only the one direct sequel. It's like they made the name, which is a pun on the film Clash of the Titans first, and then decided to make a game based on that pun name alone. The cutscenes are good, but they're too few and far between, and the enemy dialogue practically stops after the first few levels anyway.
No, I don't see any bandicoots, so be quiet, you silly person.
Why's the boss kidnapping mutants? Doesn't he like us? Like when
An
he
enemy,
first met us? Oh, he was so romantic and lovely!
Also, this might be a bit nitpicky, but it really bugs me that there's no hub worlds or an open world or anything, just level by level on a select screen, and not even a controllable map screen to select between like in the original, just menus to select each chapter. And that really sours my experience with this game even more, to be honest. This is the kind of lazy level select I'd only expect from PlayStation games based on Disney movies, and even they didn't always do that. 100% completion is a chore, with finding all these collectible voodoo dolls, smashing all these cameras, defeating every enemy in a level, etc, etc. Nothing to do with any crystals, gems or relics here, and nothing that makes me ever want to bother. Hell, I don't ever want to play the game again in general. I remember finishing this game, then asking for the direct sequel Crash Bandicoot Mind Over Mutant for Christmas, either because I truly hoped this game was better, or I just wanted to prove how much of a Crash fan I was by getting and finishing all his games I possibly could. But most people I talked to seem to agree with my opinion on this. My younger brothers really enjoyed it, but it's really easy to dismiss them as just not knowing any better. Easy and correct. The controls work perfectly fine, I just don't enjoy what the controls allow us to do. The soundtrack is fine, really nothing on all the preceding Crash games and nothing particularly memorable. The bosses are really just more of the same as what the rest of the game is, just with bigger enemies. Hard to really consider any of them bosses then. Crash does get power-ups the more mojo you collect, but really it's just to get jacket on more Titans. The different playstyles, besides riding Aku Aku instead of Cortexes aboard this time around, Crash, you hussy. It's just the different Titans you jack and the slightly different things they can do. At least Cortex isn't the main villain this time either. Well, not Neo Cortex anyway. If you want to enjoy this game, just watch the cutscenes on YouTube. Taking a classic platformer and changing his entire control scheme and all the character designs and turning it into a beat 'em up never works well in my opinion. So anyway, what game is next? The Legend of Spyro: A New Beginning, the game that took a classic platformer and changed his entire control scheme and all the character designs and turned it into a beat 'em up. The main difference that I thought of between this and Crash of the Titans was that I actually finished Crash of the Titans. It was a painful slog, but I never even bothered finishing the first Legend of Spyro. Hell, I didn't make it very far in at all before giving up. Legend of Spyro was successful enough to get 2 direct sequels, though I never played nor owned either of them. Clearly my experiences with A New Beginning back in 2008 and 9 weren't that memorable, so my hour and 25 minutes of playing this game really felt like a familiar yet new experience. And the result? I can't speak for how I'd feel playing it any longer than an hour and a half, but I actually quite enjoyed it. For what it is, at least. Enough that I did want to keep going and look forward to possibly playing through it all in the near future. That's in comparison to Crash of the Titans, at least. I probably didn't finish Legend of Spyro the first time around because I was so sick of the similar gameplay I'd had to Crash of the Titans. Thankfully, you actually do get to play Spyro and not a bunch of random monsters. Shame though, because this was another Christmas present I got from my loving family, and it never pretends to be canonically connected to any other Spyro game. For starters, it opens with when Spyro was just an egg and then cuts to him as a young dragon who doesn't know that he's a dragon because he was raised by dragonflies. It's a complete tonal shift too, with a story much more serious and plot focused than any other Spyro or Crash game we've seen before. While there's still plenty of humour, it's much more grounded. There's no fourth wall breaking like in A Hero's Tale. Hell, there's no acknowledgement that they're in a video game at all, which has always been a staple for the series.
Press the jump button twice to glide.
Use the triangle button when you want to zoom in and look around.
Press X to jump, then press X again while you're still in the air to glide.
There's barely any continuity when it comes to controls either. And you thought I was mad at the swapping of charge and fire? Charge is now R1. Circle is now delegated to headbutting enemies. Square is fire again, but there's actually a limit on how much fire Spyro can breathe. You do get these overly long flight sections, not that there's free roam. It's basically an on-rail shooter. The controls work perfectly fine, it's just too much of a departure from what we know as Spyro, even if it is a completely different canon. But at least when it comes to that first 85 minutes, I enjoyed this game much more than I did when I was 16 or 17 or whatever. Mind you, it's very possible that the game very quickly gets awfully repetitive after that, but it actually is pretty cool to see a more story-based game on Spyro and Sparks, even if they do look weird as shit, and not a reused villain in sight. While the humour isn't as funny or memorable as Spyro 2 or A Hero's Tale, it serves well as levity for a much bigger production, and with it comes quite the celebrity voice cast. Everyone's favourite Hobbit, besides Sam, Merry, Pippin, Bill, but Spyro is voiced by Frodo Baggins himself, Elijah Wood. An original character named Reignited is voiced by Oscar winner Gary Oldman, known to be one of the most versatile and best actors in the world. known for Darkest Hour, Leon the Professional, Bram Stoker's Dracula, The Fifth Element, Hannibal, Harry Potter, The Dark Knight Trilogy, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, Air Force One, The Book of Eli, The Hitman's Bodyguard, and many, many more. And Sparks is voiced by David Spade. Nah, I do love David Spade, he's just an easy target, especially when he goes a bit ham on some of Sparks' lines.
I've heard some doozies in my day, but that takes the cake. Seeing and catching are two different things, a big boy.
But he does make some lines funnier than they would have been otherwise.
Oh, that's right, you walk everywhere. That's too bad.
It is funny to see this cast list and think Elijah Wood from the Lord of the Rings franchise, Gary Oldman from the Harry Potter and Dark Knight franchises, David Spade from the Grown Ups franchise. But honestly, out of all the scenes I've seen so far, I think David Spade being David Spade up against the super serious Gary Oldman is my favorite.
Okay, now.
I'm afraid it's not that easy, Sparks.
But if we see danger, we should run, right?
There are times when all of us need to stand up to danger, young Sparks.
But while Spade can be funny and Oldman has a beautiful voice, I think Wood as Spyro was actually really impressive. He seems to genuinely care about his character here, more so than your typical celebrity voice actor in a kid's cartoony video game at least. He gives Spyro more nuance than we've seen before, as the writing intended, I'm sure.
Sparks, look out! No!
Well, most of the time. I haven't played enough of the game to comment on the variants of level designs or any bosses, but there doesn't seem to be much in the lieu of collectibles, that's for sure. But this is another game that I might be looking forward to playing through fully in the near future. There are breaths other than fire and unlockable skills, which certainly gives a lot more range to the playability of this game than Crash Bandicoot, where your new attacks are just the new monsters you can watchdogs hack into. Spyro was back to being the only playable character. They didn't even let us play as David Spade in the Emperor's New Groove game. We got JP Manute.
Let's go! I want to get away from this village, out of this body, and back to my palace so I can build Kuzcotopia.
The soundtrack is definitely going a lot more for ambience this time around, and as a result, it's probably the least impressive one we've heard so far. The main villain is built up to be this dragon called Cinder.
Hey, it's Cinder!
But considering, that she, spoiler alert, is a good guy in later games and voiced by Christina Ricci, that does intrigue me as to what happens in the story of these games. Once again, I thought Crash had this one in the bag, just for the pure fact that I remember bothering to finish Crash of the Titans, but gave up very early into A New Beginning. However, this time Spyro is taking home this PS2 game battle, because even if A New Beginning does get slow, boring, and repetitive shortly after this flying level, at least it wasn't half an hour in like this fucking game. Now I guess we move on to the direct sequels to both of these. Well look, I played Crash Bandicoot Mind Over Mutant for 2.5 hours when I got it for Christmas 2009, and the best thing I can say about it are the cutscenes are fantastic. Almost all of them have a different animation style, which gives it a wonderfully creative and fresh watchability, as well as the script being hilarious.
Punch him in the throat! Not my throat! I need that for swallowing!
That's one of the most quotable video game lines I've ever heard. Move over, Duke Nukem and Dracula. So I hadn't played it for 13 years, but I have now, just finishing the whole thing the past week, and I can at least say this game is better than Crash of the Titans. But only slightly. The fact that it's an open world instead of level by level menu is so much better, but then it's just back to the same gameplay of hot-wiring Titans and then it's a Pokemon brawler instead. Well, the open world is good in theory until you're going back and forth through it over and over again. I'd go into more detail on this game and would have recorded me playing it myself, but I've never played nor do I own a copy of The Legend of Spyro the Eternal Night, so a comparison really isn't necessary. I just wanted to point out that while it's an improvement, Mind Over Mutant really is another slog like Crash of the Titans, and the fact that it took me 13 years to play it again speaks volumes. Hell, Crash didn't even get a sequel to Mind Over Mutant, but Spyro did for Eternal Night, which means Crash never got a game on PS3, but Spyro did. Which is really nice. It's really the only time I've seen Spyro succeed where Crash simply did not. And if I end up liking A New Beginning enough, I might find a way to play Eternal Night and Dawn of the Dragon too, even though there's no David Spade in them. So last but not least, the final showdown between Spyro and Crash, their respective remakes of their respective original trilogies. When Crash N.Sane came out in 2017, it was constant talk and on my mind for a whole year if Spyro would get the same treatment. I didn't want to get my hopes up, so I happily just let it be wishful thinking. Then when it did come out, it became the first video game I purchased for myself in over 10 years. Most I've ever spent on a game, I think, too, was $70. I was content with watching two of my friends play Crash N.Sane at the time when it first came out, and it wasn't until one of them gave me his PS4 copy in 2019 that I played it through myself. By then I'd already 100%ed every game on Spyro Reignited. Now while I've made it very clear that I prefer the Spyro Trilogy over Crash for the core gameplay, all of which is still present in both remakes, since they're both completely accurate to levels, item location, script, and almost everything, I'll mostly be judging this round based on how they adapted both games. Because as faithful as these one-by-one remakes are, there are ever so slight changes that either helped or hindered each one. For example, the remake of Crash 1 completely fixes the save game system. Because come on, this shit would be embarrassing on PS4. There actually is a box counter so you can keep track of how many boxes you're breaking in the levels of Crash 1 and 2. You don't have to survive the level in one go just to get the box gem, except for in a few select levels. You have optional access to a level called Stormy Ascent, which was taken out of the original PS1 game before release, for being too hard and it's fun as hell. You can swap Crash out for Coco anytime in the map after the first few levels and vice versa. You can try again in a Torna, Brio or Cortex round as much as you want if you die, which you probably will, and Papa Bless autosave, even though it can be confusing and lead to lost progress if you're playing more than one file. And Aku gives you hints so you're not as helpless at finding out how to get colored gems. The most obvious upgrade is of course the graphics. The game looks fucking beautiful. The intro cutscene actually plays when you start the game, and is properly animated and voice acted with the best Cortex Lex Lang. I'm sorry Brendan O'Brien, who did all the voices in Crash 1, you're still the pioneer of voicing Crash, Cortex, Brio, Pinstripe, Engine and Tiny Tiger.
Uh-oh.
The only negative really is how Crash interacts with the ground. Back in '96 the hitbox for the floor was a straight rectangle, whereas in N.Sane it's insanely pill-shaped, which means if you don't land on the exact center of the platform, most likely you're going to slide off, which means these bridge levels are particularly infamous. That danger sign has never been more relevant. But the positives of course outweigh that, and I can say that for the remakes of Crash 2 and 3 as well. The biggest addition to the gameplay is the fact that the time trials that originated in Crash Warped have now been implemented into Crash 1 and 2. Not necessary to gain anything but 102% completion, and for bragging rights because my god I dare not ever attempt to get the Platinum Relics. Besides that, Crash 2 is almost exactly the same, but a bit more fair since Aku gives you a hint on how to get the blue gem, even when the internet is commonplace now. The levels are still great, the bosses are still lame, the cutscenes have so much more character to them now. Again, after the first warp room you can swap to Coco at any time, and all the same with 3, except the bosses are good, you get the idea, and you can swap to Coco whenever. Except the opening cutscene is kinda lame, since you don't get this spooky evil shadow of Uka Uka with Entropy lurking in the background. You get this sperm deliver his first few lines, then turn into a much smaller, brighter and cartoony looking Uka Uka. Well, I guess it could be worse. And then no Tropy in the background, he just appears through his portal and smiles seductively at that little twink Cortex. But yeah, other than that, no complaints really. In 2018 we even got a DLC level, an original level designed by Activision called Future Tense and Warped, and fucking hell it's awesome. I love these games, and it's a much better way to experience the Crash Trilogy because of all the qualities of life they did put in. They made a great trilogy even better, so much better in fact that I can't imagine going back to the original trilogy other than nostalgia, and being able to land in these levels. And this cutscene. The remade soundtrack absolutely kicks ass too, so clearly Activision and Vicarious Visions blew their remake out of the park with their visions. But how did Activision and Toys for Bob go with remaking Spyro a year later? Well, Spyro 1 has autosave now too, meaning I don't lose hours of progress like a moron, which is fantastic. Other than that, there aren't that many quality of life changes to be made to Spyro, because as we all know, Spyro 1 shits all over Crash 1, LMAO. Seriously though, no need to change anything in the form of checkpoints or giving you hints in the loading screens. Hell, the only thing they added to the loading screens was interactability, since you can make Spyro ascend, descend, spitfire one time, and roll whenever you're waiting. It's not useful, but damn, it's cool. The soundtrack is remade too, but it doesn't kick quite as much ass in comparison to the original as Crash's remake did. You could tell it was going for a more ambient thing too, but they put in an option that you can change the music from Reignited to original and back anytime you wanted. Man, that's even cooler than playing as Coco or a newly playable level. I might be exaggerating there, but I love how they wanted us to have the Spyro experience we wanted. The graphical update is out of this world. I think 1998 Spyro was still beautiful, but the 2018 Spyro? Look at this shit. It's prettier than the Crash remake, I'll say it now. The character designs of all the dragons have so much added to them. The artisans are making art, whether that be a painting or a cake. Spyro controls so much better. There's no time trials, but Spyro's level design doesn't really work like that anyway. The levels are still great, the bosses are still lame, and Tom Kenny is Spyro again.
Looks like I've got some things to do.
Sparks is completely silent again, probably because after David Spade they reveled in the fact that they could get Sparks to shut the fuck up. Just kidding. Now here's what they changed about Spyro 2. Well, they got rid of the Gateway to Glimmer subtitle for the power regions. Everywhere gets the lesser title Ripto's Rage now, and Ripto was just as raging as ever, still being voiced brilliantly by Greg Berger. Greg isn't Hunter anymore though, we get Robbie Damon as Hunter. Robbie's cool and all.
Oh, I got a little lost.
But I really miss how brain-dead Greg made Hunter sound.
Did you bring any chips?
Did you bring any chips?
Have they got any chips?
Cassandra Lee Morris is Alora, while Tom Kenny is the Professor again. I have no complaints about these voices, but then you get to the NPCs, whose wacky voices really made the original Spyro 2 so much fun.
Even though I'm a vegetarian, I think you should kill that Yeti. He's pretty tough though. In fact, I'm not so sure you're up to it.
Romeo! Romeo! Wherefore art thou, Romeo? Oh, there's Romeo. You can have this. I don't need it anymore.
Spyro, the Ice Wizards have imprisoned our leader, Shaman Tuck. Can you help us rescue him? It is urgent. He has our tickets to tonight's hockey game in Colossus Valley.
And instead they sound like this.
Even though I'm a vegetarian, I think you should torch that Yeti. He's pretty tough though. In fact, I'm not sure you're up to it.
Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou, Romeo? Oh, there's Romeo. You can have this. I don't need it anymore.
Spyro, the Ice Wizards have imprisoned our leader, Shaman Tuck. Can you help us rescue him? It is urgent. He has our tickets to tonight's hockey game in Colossus Valley.
It might sound like a nitpick, but it really does kind of bring down the joy of this game a fair bit. There's a lot of charm and character missing when dudes who used to sound like silly McWacky now sound like Greg from down the street.
I'm so sad.
I'm so sad.
And why are you smiling? And this crosses over to Spyro 3 too, for some really weird territory. Sheila went from just a kangaroo with an Australian accent,
That's good of you, mate. No hard feelings, eh?
to an Ocker Sheila who raided Steve Irwin's wardrobe,
That's good of you, mate. No hard feelings, eh?
and also a wig. I guess I can't complain because it's the opposite of what I just complained about. They made your supervisor Sharon sound like the silly Billy Rhino Hunter. Sergeant Bird, Bentley and Agent 9 are voiced and animated to perfection, but why do these tiki dudes go from sounding like this?
I'm late for a dinner party at the Tiki Lodge, and the portal to my home just stopped working. Maybe the portal will reactivate after a few more dragons hatch.
To this.
I'm late for a dinner party at the Tiki Lodge, and the portal to my home just stopped working. Maybe the portal will reactivate after a few more dragons hatch.
As an Australian, I'm more offended by this Tiki Man than this one. Well, almost. Seriously, what the hell is that accent? You got an Australian voice actor for Sheila. Even 2000's Sheila had a British voice actress who could do a good Aussie accent. Who was Max Mitterman thinking of when he did this voice?
I just flew in from the new ruins level, and boy, are my arms tired.
Rhinox are running rampant around here, but I can't get anyone out of the Tiki Lodge long enough to do anything about it.
Seriously, Max, are you for real? A lot of Persona 5 actors are in Spyro Reignited. That being said, the character designs are all on point. Little additions like the whiskers on these seals to Agent 9's fangs are just so good. Though why did they take away the skeleton's cute little dance and replace it with him literally flossing? Remember Gulp from the original game and how much of a balance challenge he was? Well, now he's hard as fuck and homes in on you when he wants to squash you and shoot his balls right at you, so he's nearly always incredibly difficult to avoid. And if you want the skill point where you beat Gulp without taking any damage, you better wait till you get that Super Flame power up.
Come back when you have reached 100%.
Meanwhile, Spike in Spyro 3 was so hard in the original, borderline impossible to avoid his melee and projectile attacks, and hit him with some of these items, but in Reignited, easy peasy. He doesn't even look intimidating anymore. It's like they made Gulp and Spike swap difficulties for some reason. There's no permanent Super Flame in Spyro 3, but you wouldn't need it to beat Spike without getting hit anyway. Not that that's a skill point for the game. Oh, actually, that's something I hadn't spoken of till now. Skill points were introduced in the original Spyro 2, and they were little achievements you could make to get an extra life, and checking them all off would get a look into an epilogue book where Nasty Norg, Ripto, Crush and Gulp were shown to be alive with no explanation.
Oh, yeah.
Somehow. And not only were these brought back for Reignited, they were added to Spyro 1 where you get the brand new missions like Flame This Flower. I'm a skilled gamer. Honestly, the cutscenes of these really took advantage of what a video game character could do in terms of animation.
Calm down, Hunter, and stop fidgeting.
But you saw the professor's book. They have claws like this, teeth like this, and they spit fire like this. Pooh, pooh.
Calm down, Hunter, and stop fidgeting.
But you saw the professor's book. They have claws like this, and teeth like this, and they can spit fire like this.
They've even added some nice little touches like Bianca about to free Hunter from his cage before saying that she can't let him go, while the scenes with Bird, Bent and Nine being caged actually adds in some dialogue for each of them. Yet still no cutscene added to either time you fight the sorceress. Come on guys, Crash got 2 whole new levels but you can't even add a cliche, "So Spyro, we meet at last."
Look out, Hunter, it's the scary sorceress.
But to be fair, Spyro 3 Reignited was clearly a rush job. Not only did they not have the time to add full cutscenes, they didn't even have time to fix a bunch of glitches. I think most of them have been patched out now, but when I first played it, my god, it was a bit of a mess. Swimming into this whale full and froze my game and I had to reset my PS4. Thank the lords for autosave. Nowadays, if I'm anywhere near the whale and I feel the controls be slightly bit janky, I shit my pants. This whale may look better than his PS1 counterpart, but he is far more evil. I bet he ate that egg on purpose and intended to eat Spyro to kill him, unlike this lovely PS1 whale who ate the egg to keep it safe for Spyro and then opened his mouth so Spyro could save it. So maybe Activision didn't give as much care to Spyro as it did to Crash. So Crash does win the round in which their remakes were handled, but overall I'm still picking Spyro any day. Look, I must love it despite its shortcomings and glitches. It's the only game I've ever gotten all the trophies on. Just look at the beautiful platinum trophies. So, too long didn't watch Dragons Are Cool. Crash Bandicoot may have had Crash Nitro fueled, It's About Time, On the Run, and an announcement for Team Rumble all in the past 6 years since the N.Sane Trilogy, while Spyro hasn't gotten the goddamn thing in the 5 years since Reignited. But I don't believe that's because Crash is the better series. For the most part, Crash just did all these things before Spyro did, even though I'd argue that most of the time Spyro did it better. Spyro had a large amount of villains, with only Ripto ever showing up more than once, while Cortex was the baddie in every main Crash entry bar Twinsanity.
I betrayed you, took over your evil plan, and then failed.
Oh, Nina, betraying me is the most vile, evil thing you could have ever done. You were a skank.
Crash quickly becoming the poster boy for PlayStation less than a year after it came out, it could be argued that the Crash games are more accessible, with the simplicity of run, jump and spin your way from A to B, where Spyro had more to it in terms of having to collect different types of items along the way in a much more open and beautiful environment. Crash also tried to pull a Mario and take on different genres in his spin-offs, with the huge success of his racing games, the embarrassing messes of his party games and a mobile infinite runner, whereas outside of Skylanders, which is such a departure from Spyro that I have no intention of ever even playing it, Spyro has really stuck to his guns in what he does best, even if it doesn't always turn out for the best, or changes how it's a platformer in some way. But due to its ambition, clarity, level design, control, experimentation, and how much fun it is to just play, this is why I prefer Spyro over Crash, especially when we're talking about the original trilogy. Wrath of Cortex and Crash Twinsanity may have been better games to start on the PS2 gen, slightly, but from then on, Spyro kept up, and we all know that he deserves not only a new game, but to be remembered as a PlayStation mascot just as much, if not more, than the Bandicoot that looks like a fox. But at the end of the day, I love them both. They're both in my top 10 games for a reason. Love Spyro and love Crash. Although to be fair, Spyro never had this.
I just flew in from the new ruins level, and boy, are my arms tired. Thank you very much, baby. Thank you very much.